right before this conversation, Jim and I had an opportunity to quickly chat, just bumping into each other prior to the conference. And one of the things he said was that there's been a number of shifts happening in media and entertainment. And he witnessed a lot of them over the course of last 20 years or so. And right now, it's yet another massive shift, like wave is happening. And everybody understands that AI has an enormous impact on media, on entertainment, the way we create and consume content. But in your perspective, what exactly is the shift? And what exactly is happening? And how does AI penetrate media enterprises?
Small question to start this. This is great. So, yeah, I've been fortunate to participate in a number of technology shifts within entertainment. During my career at Warner Brothers, I was fortunate enough to start at the days of when content distribution around movies was fundamentally changing from VHS to DVD. And then I lived through the switch over to digital streaming and such. And so got to experience all of that and the changes it wrought. I also was fortunate and oversaw our gaming group for a while. And in that experience, going from platforms to the mobile phone and going largely to free-to-play games and such, I got to see the technological change in that as well. And so each time we have one of these iterations, there's massive change that happens in the storytelling, but also the distribution, the monetization models, and ultimately what's happening in the background of all this stuff is the tools to tell these stories. And that's what this all comes down to. Ultimately, it is storytelling. And, you know, I think the oldest profession is actually storytelling, and it continues to evolve and change. What I'm particularly excited about, and I guess I would say I'm a technological optimist on this, is that AI and the tools that are being developed now will have a chance to fundamentally change how storytelling happens. And there's a number of examples. We're just starting to see the pieces of it that are coming about. And it'll take a little while for them to actually develop. But there's already some very cool things. I saw just recently a screening of a film called Eno. Has anybody heard of a documentary called Eno? No. So there's one out there. Great. So Brian Eno, a prolific creator, incredible producer of music and such, a very creative guy. He was willing to participate in this experiment, which was to create the first generative documentary. And the way it works is there's over 400 hours of content he's collected over his career, supplemented with 30 hours of interviews that the documentarian did. And then they take all this content and then it goes through a computer, essentially. And it creates a different version of the film every single time. The director was in town here in LA just recently, and he said they have created over 300 versions of the film. It's actually showing, if you're in New York, there's a theater that you can actually go and see it. And they've tracked at least one individual as of 2 weeks ago who's been to 16 of those versions of the film. So every time it's different. And what the director said he's trying to do is he's trying to tell stories in a different way. This is the perfect venue for this discussion, which is if you come here for a concert and say it's Lady Gaga and she's playing 2 or 3 nights, the night you come is going to be a different experience than somebody else comes on the next night.
You're going to be living in a constant state of FOMO.
Yes, exactly. As a constant state of FOMO, but in the traditional movie and television world, that concept doesn't exist because what you see is what you get, that everybody sees around the world, except for maybe some things around censorship and such, but it's the same exact experience. And what the filmmaker, the creator, was trying to do is to use the technology to create that FOMO of saying, I was there on this night and this is what I saw, and create a completely different experience. So that to me is an early example of how this technology will allow unique and different storytelling.
I just want to, I have many questions for you guys, but I need to build on this a little bit. So, what does that imply for leadership? So, imagining this going mainstream, this ability to drive FOMO among consumers through technology, how does it change how leadership thinks about leadership in media and entertainment companies think about decision making?
Anybody who's in the entertainment business, I feel for you. It is a hard place to be right now. I was at Warner for 25 years. I left about a year and a half ago, and we were all wrestling with these problems. These technological shifts change so many different things. A big part of what is changing right now is the fundamental business models on which these businesses have been built. They're also changing the contracts with the creators. And this is why you saw the strikes last year in Hollywood. What's different about this time, from my perspective, those other things I talked about were kind of technological platform shifts. This is actually has the potential to change the creative spark and what actually happens. And thinking about it, I think one of the reasons why this one's so difficult for the humans involved in this process is that the technology was supposed to take everybody else's jobs. Creativity is human, and so I'm safe. The machines aren't coming for me. This is the first time I think we're seeing the glimpse of the machines that say, oh my gosh, it has synthesized all of humanity, all of the storytelling, all of the knowledge, and it may have a bigger superpower than I myself have had. Now, that's the negative side of it. The positive side to me is because it's taken all of humanity and has the ability to synthesize it, that we can come up with new ways of storytelling. I'm a firm believer that it's going to be in the short term, and maybe even longer term, it's going to be a tool for humans to tell better stories. We can talk about the platform distribution side of it, because for a lot of the tech execs here and such, they're going to have to be built. They do not exist yet. So for instance, this Eno film, the generative concept of a movie, you can do it in a movie theater because what you do is the machine does its thing and you put it out, and then you got a digital print and you can deliver that to any movie theater. But if you're sitting at home and you've got millions of people potentially hitting that, that platform doesn't exist yet today. So there's going to be a platform change and augmentation that's going to come in order to actually deliver some of these experiences.
You know, the most fascinating thing about change to me is nobody is ever ready for it. Mm. And we all know the story of Blockbuster, right, that has been crushed by Netflix because nobody thought that we will ever transition from DVDs. So how do we learn a lesson going through this change? And how do we get prepared, both in terms of this growth mindset and openness to change in the industry that has been operating in a certain way for so many years, but also as just thinking proactively, not knowing what is the actual impact of AI because it's yet to be determined, right? So over to you, Ralf. What's your take on that?
Well, if I take a look at what Jim just said with regards to what changed, for one, our legal department doubled in size. And the challenge that we have with, at TelevisaUnivision, we're sitting on very large libraries that are, 40, 50 years old. And we've been approached by a lot of big companies like OpenAI, like Google, like IBM to say, hey, can we use your content in order to train our LLMs? So legal department, of course, is freaking out saying, hold on, if we enable them by learning, what our content is all about, are we enabling a future competitor with creating content through artificial intelligence? The hard part for the legal departments right now is trying to figure out where do you draw the line saying this is safe and this isn't safe. So I'm not surprised that the legal department has ultimately, doubled in size because they're still trying to figure this out. The change is happening so fast right now. that there's an influx of inquiries from the legal department saying, well, how we're going to deal with this now. When we talked about it in the green room moment, when dubbing came around, think in terms of shows that were recorded 15, 20, 30 years ago, and all of a sudden AI has the capability of using that talent's voice, but now it's speaking French or German instead of Spanish. That is a huge issue for us because the contracts never even foresaw that something like this could happen. So for the new content that is being created right now, there are provisions being put into, now I sound like a lawyer even though I'm a techie, but it's really part of what we're dealing with on a daily basis. The legal department wants to put all kinds of rails around how something like a breach or a lawsuit cannot happen, right? With regards to the dubbing capabilities and the production you mentioned, how has AI influenced your distribution capability? It is now dealing with the content as it's coming out of a can and being digitized, where we're seeing efficiencies that are tremendous with regards to an eye on cost savings. A synopsis rewrite. If we distribute a telenovela, let's say to Amazon versus a Netflix versus a Roku box, we've been asked to rewrite the synopsis to certain characters, be that 255, 150, 120, whatever it is. We use human beings for that. And then we have a QC department that ultimately looked at this and goes through the entire process, says, yes, we can bless this. It's 120 characters, send it off to whoever it is. The part that becomes now challenging from a production perspective is the people that are working on the technology and have been doing this as a human being, rewriting the synopsis, are slowly being put out of a job. And there's a pattern evolving right now in the content distribution where more and more of that is happening. We're now at a point where the accuracy of AI understanding, contextual awareness on what's happening in the scene, the translation, the transcription services, compliant closed captioning, etc., can all be replaced by the use of AI. And with that comes now the challenge that the teams that are currently working on this, they know they're digging themselves a hole because half a year from now, that job's no longer there. What we haven't parted with is the need for quality control. Because even though it is AI, you will continuously, especially with languages that are spoken as fast as Spanish, there's a lot of learnings that still have to do with regards to the accuracy. So if you're at 90, 95%, you still need a QC department that goes in and corrects those mistakes.
Patricia, as someone who has helped so many companies, not just media, but so many companies, to go through this transformation, to figure out their relationships with Gen AI on a broader scale, what are the most common challenges that companies face that might be relevant for media industry?
Well, that's a huge question again.
I love that whole question, so thank you very much.
I know that. It's fantastic. So thank you everyone for being here. And it was a great topic, and we were discussing before some of the challenges that many companies are having these days, right? So everybody's talking about we want AI, but not everyone still really know what they want from the AI. So we're here trying to design maps from the media and entertainment. Specifically about this, I mean, I think that there's a major change in terms of the advertising, for example, is the hyper-personalization of advertising. But that's not has to do with we as Globant. I mean, we are obsessed, of course, of technology, but when we are talking with companies, we are obsessed about the consumers or the users of those things that the companies are doing. So I think that is one very big thing to think. Don't get confused about technology. Get focused on consumer, what your consumers really want, and how to get there faster and in a more intelligent way, as we are talking about artificial intelligence. So I think that in terms of advertising, there's a lot of things that has to do with that hyper personalization, right? But not only about how the advertising is getting to you, it's also about how you are consuming a content. For example, you are seeing a movie and you're seeing in the middle of a movie that someone is eating something or doing sport, and at the same time you can receive something that has to do with the content of what you are seeing. So now it's not only the demographics that we know about the people, it's also about the behavior of what the people is doing while they're consuming those media, right? And that thing is really, really a challenging thing, and how we're going to tackle, because platforms are still are not ready. So we are developing different kind of thing that has to do how to get there closer and closer. Another thing that is really is, of course, about the content. Most of us know, and we are talking a lot about getting there in a more specific and personalized way. But again, it's not about, I want to know, okay, you are a woman and I live in Madrid right now. I'm a woman and I like to do this kind of thing. So they can view my historical navigation from internet, or what I am doing in my social network. It's not just that. Now they can see where I'm buying, what I am buying, in what time I'm buying, if I like the coffee in the morning, and what places I'm going. So they can connect all of things and give me content that has to do, again, is connecting the data points that AI is revolutionizing the scenario of media and advertising. So I think that those things are really important. And the third one, as we are here in terms of the Intuit Dome and this scenario that is magnificent, I would love to talk about the sports, right? And how we are, AI is helping the organizations to reinvent themselves about this. And it is probably AI is replacing most of the thing that the broadcasters are doing right now, is that in terms of, okay, I'm going to give you some content to this spectator. Now, most of those things, you can probably replace them with AI and try to figure out, okay, how can I get to the people? So sport organizations are starting to think about, okay, how can I get to the consumer, to the fans directly? And that is one thing that Globant is helping. In this case, you can see this scenario, and well, you can be very hyper personalized experience getting here. As he was mentioning, you see the Lady Gaga show, but then you can have the apps in order to have a better experience. Now you can get here and I have the show, as we saw the match yesterday, and see what are your players, your preferred players that you can achieve, and how you can see them in the app in a different way. So those kind of things are things that we are thinking all the time in terms of media and entertainment. Of course, in many other industries, we are doing different things that helps reinvent. I think it is a perfect moment to think about reinventing in all the things about companies, and that is the magic moment.
Is I love creativity and I love technology, and I
Yeah.
love how the two things come together. Amazing, can create incredible experiences. And what is happening now is just on steroids, X 1,000. So there is so much that's going on there. And you mentioned I'm taking some time. Part of it is to try and understand where it's going and where the opportunities are, and try to figure out where you can parachute in and then kind of help shape that as it goes forward. Because every piece of it has changed. You mentioned that, the one groups that are actually growing in our companies is the legal teams.
Yes.
Because of all of these issues are so difficult. And I know that all the studios are very careful about how they use AI, because they don't want it to show up on the screen at this point, because there's so many ethical issues and things that come together on it. A lot of that innovation is going to come from the independents, like this director who created Eno. Those are the folks who are going to go out because they have the ability to experiment and do what they do, but it eventually will come into all of it and completely enhance things. And just one other thing, because I think it's fascinating. You were talking about ads and how ads are targeted, and they're getting better and better in targeting us from a psychographic, not just a demographic standpoint anymore. The content itself. Right now, the algorithms are putting content in front of us because they know what we want even before we know what we want, right? So we can get our dopamine hits. And those platforms are out there, and they're so good at it. I believe that there will be a point where the content itself is influenced by you, and it will be content created for the audience of one.
Yes.
There'll be a connective tissue around it, but it'll be tricking your dopamine centers specifically as it goes through it. We had a game and this was years ago. It was called Shadow of Mordor, there's any Lord of the Rings fans out there. We had a game system at the base of it called Nemesis. We called it Nemesis, and it was early machine learning, but it was AI. And the orcs learned and remembered how you fought them. And so the game was unique for every time you went into it, and you as a game player went into it. That's the beginning of that narrative storytelling that'll be unique to the individual.
It's already there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of this, the concept of, we started thinking about this years ago, and we called it virtual linear feeds. There's so much conversation going on about linear feeds are dead. Linear will not ever be dead because there's sports, there's news, and tentpole events. This will never go away. But this concept of a virtual linear feed, if you combine this now with artificial intelligence, imagine what happens to the user that likes to go to Netflix, is searching for a particular show, but the show is not there. The AI is now smart enough to figure out what it is that he's really interested in, and now starts concatenating different types of, reels that we already see on companies like Netflix pop up. This same user now goes back out, comes back a day later, but the AI in the background said, this guy really was looking for this particular content, and now grabs the content, and the next time this user logs in, all of a sudden that piece of content is available. That is the most stickiest thing you can do to an end user to make sure that they're repeat visitors. And that is what we're all in for, right? We're trying to, get churn down. We're trying to up our subscription services because that's the new revenue that we require in combination of ads in order to cope with the dying of the linear business, right? And so I think the recommendation AI and what is happening and how content is being presented every time you log into any of these platforms, that's key of what's going to happen going forward, when now the automation of content creation and potentially games is starting to really be, possibly created within hours or maybe even minutes at that point in time. And now you really create this illusion of I'm binge watching content that is just catered to me, right?
Yes. I think this combination of hyper personalization, automation, subscription as a business model, and an increasingly important revenue channel, the interesting open question, which we will leave unanswered, would be, is there any big fat line after which it's too much personalization? It's too much knowing what people want. And would people realize at some point that they're so hooked on the way that platform hooked them that they need to figure out the way to unhook themselves, And would that open new opportunities for crafts, for artisanal crafts in the industry, the way the industry existed before? And I think it's a slightly philosophical question, and we're going to pick it up on stage.
Okay.
Off stage, because we have just run out of time. Thank you so much, guys. It's been fantastic conversation, left me with a lot of mental notes, and hopefully you too.
Thank you.
Right.